rekindling my love for Mystery Science Theater 3000, I realized there's one addition to the MST3K library I'd never seen before, or, more accurately, I'd always avoided because of its bad reputation.
Mystery Science Theater 3000, the movie. Now, if you spent any time around cinematic adaptations of television shows, you know how much artistic cred slapping "the movie" onto the end of your title gives a project. But to be fair, just because your average series "the movie" ain't no Citizen Kane, most are perfectly watchable, some are quite good. And chances are you'll end up with a comfortable hour-long time waster.
And I'll try anything once. A few minutes in, I had no idea what all the disappointment was about.
The riffing was funny, the host segments were funny, and even if it lacked the charm of the homemade sets, you can't tell me you didn't enjoy seeing Mike and the Bots stroll down the theater hallway. My expectations were raised dramatically, and I settled in for the rest of this awesome film.
And that's exactly when I realized where all the disappointment was coming from.
I'll cut right to the chase here. This movie ends in the middle. Just when I started thinking we were probably about halfway through this mess, I realized the movie was almost over. Where was the rest of it? There was no way it could be that short.
Time for some numbers. Your average episode of Mystery Science Theater runs about an hour and a half, that's 90 minutes. This Island Earth, the experiment for Mystery Science Theater 3000, the movie, has a runtime of 87 minutes. Mystery Science Theater 3000, the movie, is 73 minutes long.
When the credits started rolling, I remember feeling frustrated more than anything else. There was this maddening sense of incompleteness, like there should be more and I'd somehow been conned out of getting my money's worth. That's actually partially true, but the real problem was that I'd simply come to expect more from the show. It wasn't bad, but if this was supposed to be Mystery Science Theater, just bigger and better, it certainly wasn't.
What happened? Well, the story of MST3K the movie is a long and kind of convoluted one.
A lot of the charm of the show itself comes from the low budget. The best brains didn't have big-time studio execs breathing down their necks telling them what they could and couldn't do. Because of that, the show ended up a big creative playground for all these talented writers who often did and said exactly what they wanted to do and say just because they could. Yes, a lot of the jokes were incredibly obscure, but there were plenty that weren't, and to me, having to do a little research to understand some of the more esoteric ones is part of the fun.
This is like that time I hit the reporter with Piltdown Man's thigh bone.
Working with a big studio brought Best Brains a bigger budget, but also more creative restraints. On top of a shorter running time and having to keep the jokes less obscure to appeal to a wider audience, the Best Brains were constrained a bit on what movie they were allowed to tear apart. It had to be bad, but not too bad. Namely, it had to be in focus, it had to be in color, and it had to have a relatively high production value so it looked good on the big screen. The Best Brains chose the sci-fi classic This Island Earth and were promptly thrust into they panned it, now they suck territory by fans of the actual film.
MST3K the movie is not a train wreck, and considering the amount of creative and financial hurdles the team had to clear just to get it into theaters, it probably could have been a lot worse. But the entire production is kind of tainted with the air of people who are doing things because they're being forced to do them rather than because they want to do them, which, ironically enough, goes against the very spirit of the television show.
The film's distributors, Gramercy Pictures, had another movie coming out the same week as Mystery Science Theater 3000. They had a limited budget and so had to choose which film they really wanted to promote. They chose Pamela Anderson's boobs and only released MST3K in 26 theaters.
But MST3K the movie was causing waves before it even went into production, and had massive repercussions on the show afterwards.